Hello, so in this video we are going to see how can we implement slowly changing dimension type 2 strategy using IICS mapping. Now before we actually start creating the mapping, let's understand our data and also the difference between type 1 and type 2 strategy. Now let's assume this is my data set and employees is my source table or the transactional OLTP table, wherein I have columns like employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number and salary. Now here employee ID is the primary key in my source. Okay, so that means I will not have multiple records for a certain employee ID. Now when it comes to type 1 will have same granularity of what we have at OLTP side. Basically will not be maintaining the history of a particular dimension attribute. For example, let's say this is my employee, and let's say on 1st of Jan that the record got created very initially, right? And with salary as $3,000. Now, at that time, on 1st of Jan, will not find a record in my dimension table because the record got created recently in the transaction table itself. Now, overnight, when that job runs, the incremental job which pulls the records from source to target, that job will insert a record in my dimension table. So on 1st of Jan, let's say the salary is $3,000 and creation date is 1st of Jan, and at that time the updation date would be null. Now on 2nd of Feb, let's assume my salary got changed from $3,000 to $5,000. Okay, now since in type 1 will not be maintaining the history, the same record will get updated from $3,000 to $5,000. Okay, and the updation date would be 2nd Feb. Okay, now same on 30th of March, let's say the salary got changed from 5,000 to 6,000. Same record in my type 1 dimension will get modified. Now drawback of this is, let's assume business wants to see for a particular employee how frequently and at what time period the salary got changed. So that is something we cannot identify. We can't do the reporting based on that. Reason being, we are not maintaining the history at all. And that's very reason, if there is a business scenario wherein they want to find out the historical change of particular dimension attribute, we need to change our type 1 strategy to type 2. Now the difference between type 1 and type 2 is we are having extra columns. Let's say effective start date, effective end date, and latest record flag. Now here also the granularity gets changed. Now as you can see here, for type 1, as we mentioned, we'll be keeping only one employee ID, whereas in type 2 we'll be maintaining the history of our employee ID, of our employee record, right? So as you can see here, we are keeping the history like very initially when the record got created on 1st of Jan, the salary was 3,000. On 2nd of Feb, my salary got changed from 3,000 to 5,000, and that's the reason we created additional record with that change. So there was a change in the salary attribute, and we created a new record and we updated the prior record with end date as first Feb. Okay, so basically by this way we can identify a particular attribute change and also the timeline of it. So for example here, the $3,000 salary which I had, that was valid for this particular duration. Okay, also the 5,000 salary which I had, that is valid for this particular duration. And finally my current salary, so that you can also identify based on this latest record flag. So my current salary is $6,000. All right, now let's start creating the mapping for that. Now what we'll be doing is, in prior videos we already created a mapping for incremental load which used to pull the records from employees table, the transactional table, okay, and load them into dimension table. So we'll be using that same mapping. What I will do is, let me go back. So this was the mapping. I will take a copy of it. I don't want to modify the existing mapping, so copy to, keep both, and let me rename it SCD Type 2. Alright, I will save it. Okay, now there is one more thing which we'll have to do. So so as I said, there are 7 columns, right? 7 or 8 columns in my dimension table. Now I don't want to implement that SCD change on all the columns. Okay, so let's say business need is, as per business, employee ID first name last name doesn't change for a particular employee, but the change can happen for employee email, phone number, and salary. So if there is any change between these three columns, then we'll have to create the additional record. Okay, so for that, basically we'll have to validate. So if you check this condition, right, we have to validate records from our transaction table, values for these three columns against values in dimension table. Okay, so either in this case we can compare column to column, or we can get the CRC32 value, or they call it cyclic redundancy check. So that is a inbuilt, these are the inbuilt function provided by Informatica integration service. Okay, so either we can combine these three columns and get the CRC32 value of that and compare that value between source and lookup. So for the sake of this video, we'll be using CRC32. There are multiple ways you can do that, but for now we'll be going ahead with CRC32. So what I will do is, now first let me go to the expression and let's create a new port. It's a variable port, v underscore crc32 value of what, our emp table, right? Emp source emp. It's an integer. Configure. What value we have to find out? Email, phone number, salary. So let me concatenate email, phone number, and since salary is a decimal, I will just convert that to 2 char, right? 2 char, and then crc32. So basically crc32 function accepts the string value and returns the integer. I'll just validate that. Let me copy this guy and let me create the output. So output O, it's an integer. Let me open this guy, validate. Perfect. I will save it. Now let's go back to our data set. When initially this employee record gets created, at that time that record won't be available in our dimension table. Okay, so if record doesn't exist, then go ahead and insert it. If record exists, then validate the compare the crc32 values. So first of all, how can we identify if record exists or not? So for that we'll have to use the lookup. So we are going to do the lookup on dimension table. So now let me add a lookup in between. So this lookup is based on what? LKP on dimension table, correct? And now we simply cannot use the inbuilt SQL, right? We have to override that SQL. Reason being, there will be multiple records. On what basis we are doing that lookup? So we are going to do that lookup based on employee ID. Now employee ID is no more unique in our dimension table since we are implementing the SCD type 2. And for that reason, we'll have to get the latest employee ID, and we have to make it unique. So how can we make that data set unique? That will be using latest record flag. If I don't use this filter latest record flag, it will return 3 rows. Okay, and then we really cannot compare, right? We have to compare the incoming values only against the latest record flag or latest row in our dimension table. So for that reason, I need to add this filter condition. So we cannot go with the default SQL. We have to override that lookup SQL. So I will copy this guy. Now here I have added that latest record flag filter. Let me go to my lookup transformation, lookup object on-prem, and it will be query. Perfect. Let me just preview the data. Now it doesn't have any records, that's why it's not giving anything, which is okay. Let's add the lookup condition. Okay, this, let me just expression. So anything coming from expression will be source, right? So I will use a src emp. src is fine. Okay, and what we need to return, right? So we need to return we definitely need surrogate key, because based on that we are going to determine if record exists in dimension table or not. We also need employee ID. First name, last name we don't need. We need definitely email ID, phone number, salary, because based on that we need to derive the CRC32 value. I don't need start date, end date, latest record flag creation date. That's all. So I need surrogate key, business key, employee ID, email, phone number, salary. That's all. Save it. Oh, sorry, I forgot to delete it. Uh, uh, First name, last name we don't need, email, delete. Right? Save it. This is fine. Now we have two data sets now, right? Uh, Now let's say if there is no record at all in my dimension table, we are good, just go ahead and insert it. But if there is a record, we'll also have to compare the CRC32 values. So there are two different data sets we need to join for comparison purpose. Now one data set is coming from our source, another data set which is coming from our lookup. So how can we join that? So for that we need a joiner transformation. Okay, and I need all the records coming from our source, so I will use this as a master, and records coming from our lookup dimension I will use that as a detail, and I will be defining detail outer join, so that I will be defining detail outer join. Let me just resolve this conflict. Okay, one thing I forgot, let me add that before I add the join. One thing we need to consider, if I go back, I have to derive the CRC32 values coming from lookup or dimension tables, right? So let me add the expression before that. Let me just connect it and I will add expression here. And CRC32 of dim table, right? I'll save it. Expression v underscore CRC32 of our EMP dim, let's say, right? It's a very integer port, and so these are all source, right? These are coming from source, but these ports are coming from our lookup, and we'll have to do that, derive the CRC32 values based on this. So email ID, phone number, and salary. And since salary is integer decimal, I will convert that to 2char and I will use CRC32 function. Perfect. This all looks good. Oh, you know what? This has to be variable port. Correct? And let me add another port. This is out port, so I will use O integer, right? This is fine, and let me configure it. Perfect. Now there is another thing. If we look at the mapping, let's make it more simple. Now in this expression transformation, which is coming from lookup, uh, there are multiple incoming columns, right? We really don't need all those columns. So what I will do, let me add another expression, and we'll restrict the column. Now, what all columns we really need from lookup? Definitely the CRC32 value, and also the lookup value, right, surrogate key value. So let me do that. Incoming field, based on name field, configure I will definitely need surrogate key, and I will also need uh, CRC32 value. Okay, and let me add the employee ID as well. It doesn't harm. So only these three fields. Okay, and based on employee ID, basically we'll be doing the join. So that's why we need employee ID. I will save it. Now let me go to the joiner transformation. Now one more thing we have to notice here is we'll have to use detail outer join, so all the records from master or source should get inserted at target. Another thing is both the branches for our joiner are coming from same source, so that's the reason why we have to define our joiner as sorted input. So let's first validate that. So join condition I will change from to detail outer join, so all the records from master will come. uh, we'll have to join based on employee ID, which is a business key, and if I go to advanced sorted input, I have to select. Now moment I select the sorted input, we have to make sure records coming from source are in sorted order. So let's validate if our records are in sorted order. So there is order by cost based on employee ID, so which is correct. Okay, now it still says, I will save it. Okay, now after joiner, what we'll have to see is if record doesn't exist in our target table, right? Then we just go ahead and insert it. On what basis we are going to determine if record doesn't exist? So that will be based on a surrogate key coming from our lookup table. Okay. So after that, what I will do is let me add a uh, router. Okay. Now in router transformation, I will add three groups. 1, 2, 3. The first group is insert new, right? Second group is for update, existing update, right? And third is for existing record insert. Now how we are going to determine, as I said, if it is a new record, so that will be based on surrogate key. So I will go to advanced, and where is my surrogate key? That is coming from lookup. So not is null. So if my surrogate key uh, is null, right? If my surrogate key is null, that means just mark that record as a new and load it for insertion. Correct? Now how we are going to determine if it's existing record? If my surrogate key is not null. Okay, but we can't just simply check that condition, because we are going to insert the existing record or update the existing record only when there is a change between these two columns, and that for very reason we need to validate the CRC32 value of it. So this should not be equal to this. Correct? So value CRC32 value of our source should not be equal to our dimension table. If that's true, then there is a change in the existing record and mark that record for insertion or updation. So this has to be existing record insert, right? Now this should not be default, it should go as insert. And for new insertion, let me add another expression in between. We'll have to add two more O underscore latest record flag. That should be Y, right? And then add another port for O underscore effective start date with date time, and let's say sys date, right? Save. Now let's just do the preview and see if everything is correct. So if everything is right, validation failed. So it failed in validation. Why it failed? Let's find out. So it failed in lookup. Lookup condition is not specified. So let me go back. This is my lookup. Employee ID and employee ID from source, right? Let me just let's see. Let's run our source qualifier query and see if it returns the record. It does. How many records we have in our dimension table? Nothing. So if I go to the preview, I should see all 107 records here for insertion. Come on. Okay. So we did have all 107 records, correct? So what? Let's go ahead and map those records now. Target field, field mapping. Let me first clear mapping. And this is surrogate key, which is the identity column. And since it's an insert operation, first of all, let me go to target, and it should not be upsert. It has to be insert, right? I'll save this guy. Then go to field mapping. We don't need to connect surrogate key. It's identity column, and since it's a insert operation, that ID will get created automatically. Just add. Let me just see. Okay, just add employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number, salary. Effective start date will be the derived column. Let me add latest record flag as well, and the effective start date, right? All columns got mapped. Effective start date, latest record flag. Perfect. So this part is done. Now only part which is remaining is updation of existing record and insertion of existing record. So let's add two more target tables. You know what? Let me just run it. Okay, we'll find out. Let me just run it and we'll see if all records are getting inserted. Perfect. Let's validate. So far so good. Okay. What we'll do is, since we have to recreate this scenario, I will modify the salary of my ID. So if I select this guy, okay, so I will modify this $5,000 to, let's say, $6,000. Say $6,000. Oh, not two dimension. No, 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 not here. Not here. Here, right? So let's say to $6,000, right? So now if I run my source qualifier query, it returns $6,000, whereas in dimension table my salary is $5,000. So if I rerun my mapping, as per our logic, it should create another record and update the prior record. Okay, now let's modify the rest of the mapping. Now let me add another target and one more target. Let me just maximize it. This is update existing. This is insert existing. So TGT, let's say TGT update existing. This is TGT insert existing, right? Let me just add, since it's a update insert, so it's a insert operation, so I will just mark that. Let me just, right, it's a insert operation. Let me just modify here also, it's update existing, and it's update operation, right? So again, update based on what? Now we really cannot update based on employee ID because there are duplicate entries, right? So only uniqueness in our target table is dim, surrogate key. So update based on surrogate key. Okay. Now there is an expression we need to add. Now in case of update, right, we'll have to update latest record flag from Y to N. So O underscore latest record flag. I will just define this as N, right? And we'll add another flag O underscore effective end date. That would be date time. And I will use that as sys date. Perfect. Effective end date, and let me just map it. So for updation, we don't need to update everything at target, right? Only thing which we'll have to update is definitely the surrogate key, because based on that value itself we are going to update the values. So another thing is okay, latest record flag, that should be N, right? And the effective end date. So let me just, right? And also the values, right? Email, phone number, and salary. So let me just grab that. So salary, phone number, and email. Perfect. Okay, it's all good. And let's do the same thing for our insert. It says invalid. We'll validate that. We'll find out. So let me just add expression. Now in this expression, we're again going to add two extra ports. One is O underscore latest record flag. That has to be Y since it's a insert operation, right? And then add additional column as O underscore effective start date, right? And that has to be date time, and I will use that as a sys date. Correct. We'll save this guy, and let's go back to our target and map those fields, right? So since it's an insert operation, surrogate key we don't need to map, that will get populated automatically. It's identity column. Just add remaining fields: first name, last name, email, phone number, salary. Effective start date will come from, and effective end date would be null. This is fine. Let's find out why it says invalid. Yeah, it's valid now. So if everything is correct, now I should have another entry for this employee ID. Okay, and this existing record. So new record with $6,000 or whatever, $6,000 should get created, and existing record of $5,000, the end date should get updated and this flag should get changed to N. So let's find out. Okay, let's go ahead and see. What I will do is, for comparison's sake, okay, the problem is my old entry got updated. See that? This all looks correct, but this should not have got updated. So let me go back and fix it. So this update is incorrect. So I should not update these values. Okay, I should not have done that. Let me unmap. This is fine. Okay, what I will do is, now let me just quickly fix that. Update set e dot salary equal to, it was $5,000, so that there won't be any confusion, and e dot dimemp key equal to 107, right? Okay, now let's assume if I update my salary from 6,000 to 7,000. I have these two records. Additional entry should get created. This record should get updated from Y to N. There will be effective date. Okay, let's run this now. Perfect. Let's see. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 5,000, 6,000. These are N and this is Y. All look. Let's try for last time. I will change this 7,000 to 8,000, or maybe let's change it to 5,000 again. Okay, let's match it with this. Let's see what happens. So if everything is right, I should have another fourth entry, and there should not be a change between these, right? Fourth entry with $5,000 should get created with some end date. So let's rerun this. Perfect. Let's validate. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, and 5,000. Perfect. Okay, so this is exactly what we are expecting. Okay, so we successfully implemented SCD type 2 strategy using IICS mapping. So thanks for watching this video, and in the next video we'll see how can we implement SCD type 3 strategy with the help of IICS mapping. Okay, thanks for watching this video and see you in the next video.